Perfect. Hi, everyone. Did everybody get out and enjoy the weather today? It was beautiful. It was less windy than yesterday. I was afraid something was going to blow over yesterday. We just have just a few more moments of time.
Where's the orchestra? They're going to make a grand entrance.
A very grand entrance. Very, very grand. We did for St. Patrick's Day. We had bagpipes.
I love it.
Yes, you can attest. Well,
They here in this one? Oh yeah, we had bagpipes at our concert.
and we had bagpipes here too, right here.
We had some people there that I recognized at the concert. There's a bus from here that goes down there,
Yeah.
so that's how they get there.
Well, we have Valentina and Lacey here from the Richmond Symphony. Valentina and Lacey. And they are going to talk to us for a little bit. And then at the end of the program, we're going to have a question and answer time. And I just ask that you wait to ask your question until I can bring a microphone to you so everyone can hear the question and those that are watching in their homes can hear the question as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Valentina and Lacey.
Maybe it's still up here.
I'm sure we'll find it.
I'm sure I put it in my bag.
That is the other microphone.
Looking for the clicker.
Did I take it from you? No.
To change the slides.
I mean, I can stand up here and push the slide button.
Well, that is embarrassing. I'll do it manually.
This is just to hold the suspense. This is how to.
I know, right? It's all right. I'll get up and move it when we need to do it. All right. All right. So I thought we'd start just by introducing ourselves a little bit because you probably, if you've been to a Richmond Symphony concert, you're certainly familiar
With my back.
with it. Yeah. But you might not also know me. So I'm Lacey Husha. I'm the executive director. I've been with the Symphony now for almost a year and a half. I started in December of 2020, so in the midst of all things COVID and shutdown and 10-foot orchestra spacing and 250 people in the audience with masks and all of the exciting things. So it's really fun now to have full orchestras and full audiences at our concerts. But Valentina, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you came to be a conductor and came to the Richmond Symphony?
Yeah, so hi, I'm so happy to be here and to share with you a part of our path. So that's a good question. And actually, part of my job is to conduct, is to be a conductor, but another big part of my job is to be a music director. And that's what we are going to discuss and discover together, how music director and executive director bond together in creating, drafting just one vision. So let me start saying that all music directors are conductors, but not all conductors are music directors. So conductors are the fancy people who wave their arms and do free gym at each concert, right? But as a conductor, you could also be a guest conductor, for example. So you can travel, you go to an orchestra for 1 week, you rehearse, you perform, and then you leave. You go to another orchestra, and you are responsible for that very week. But as a music director, you have the chance to stay with the group longer. It's like it's your own orchestra, it's your own group, and you are their own conductor. So you have the luxury to work with them in a much longer journey, and it's really wonderful. And to be a conductor, there are just so many different just paths. Of course, if you ask any conductor how they became a conductor, you will have millions of different answers. And I personally, when I started studying in Italy, in my country, in Florence, you actually were not allowed to even start studying conducting if you didn't have your own instrument. So you needed to do your studies in your principal instrument, which was piano for me. So I did 10 years of piano, and then you could access composition, because still you had to understand the scores before even reading them. And then after, you were locked in a room for doing the fugue. And I remember that's one of my nightmares still, to be locked in a room for 12 hours with the bathroom, the score, the piano, and you need to write a fugue. Right after that, you can access the conducting course. So yeah, quite tough.
I love that. I can commiserate with that feeling, except on my end, it was anything that involved practicing scales. So I studied music. I got a music degree. I played the French horn. I do not play the French horn anymore, but my teacher in college would tell you many very funny stories about my not wanting to practice and him trying to bribe me with dinner or snacks, or if I could practice, or if I could play something better than he could. It's funny, often people don't know that working for a symphony is a job, both on the stage as a musician, as a conductor, or on the business side. And I was one of those people. All through music school, I knew I wasn't going to be a professional musician, because it's clear if you don't really love to practice, you are not going to make it as a professional musician. But I loved the music, and I loved being at performances. I loved being a part of community activities, doing, if we were volunteering to do an instrument petting zoo for kids. And there were several years where I remember people telling me, oh, you should work for an orchestra. And all I could think, I was like, there's a music librarian, and I don't really like dealing with the music all that much, so that doesn't seem fun. And there are the people who sell the tickets, and maybe I could do that for a little while. And I had no idea. As a musician, I was one of those people who really thought, you know what, we do something awesome, we play, and people just magically show up, of course. And it was not until my last year of school, I really just happened upon an internship at a performing arts center. And I walked into the office, and this was a pretty large organization. There were probably 100 employees, and all of a sudden a light bulb went on, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is a business. This is exactly what I should be doing. Because I love strategy. I'm one of those weird people that loves spreadsheets. I love numbers. And I can still be involved in the music that I love, but I never have to play scales. So that was my way in. And so tell me a little bit about, when did you sort of first start conducting? What were the first organizations that you worked with, and how you ended up all the way from Italy to here in Richmond, Virginia?
I like to travel, and you really need to loving to travel if you're a conductor. I actually started studying in Florence, then I moved to Rome, because it was one of together with Milan, the best conservatories in my country. And then I thought, okay, this is not really enough. I just want to learn more. So I tried to find out what was the best schools in Europe for studying conducting, and I thought it was, okay, it's London, so the Royal Academy. The Royal Academy holds every year 3 auditions, the same audition in 3 continents. So they have auditions in New York, 1 audition in London, and 1 audition in Beijing, and for 2 spots, totally. So I applied and said, okay, you know what, I try. If you don't try, you never know. And I got it. So I said, okay, I moved to London. So that's how I started my adventure in London. And from London, when I finished the school, I was lucky enough to be invited in a festival in São Paulo, in Brazil. I didn't know anything of Brazil, but you know, if after 3 years in London with the London weather, you know, somebody tells you, Valentina, would you like to come to represent our school in Brazil? Sure, when are we leaving? So I went there, and I found out that actually was a very, very excellent, very cool environment. It was a festival, and at the end of the 3 weeks, that's where I met Marin Alsop, for example. And at the end of 3 weeks, there was a prize for conducting, which I didn't even know, that I won. And the prize was actually to be invited as an assistant conductor in the São Paulo Symphony Orchestra, which is one of the best orchestras in South America. So I went there, just, you know, I did my month, I did my performances, and at the end, the conductor that I was covering just fell ill. So I got my chance, like, okay, it's your turn, okay, I go, with no rehearsals, just straight then. And everybody was happy, and that's how I started working in Brazil. First as assistant conductor, then resident conductor, then conductor of the professional chorus, then music director of the opera, and that's how I went there, stayed there for 5 years. And then I went back to London. I went back to London to work with the English National Opera. And then I've heard that there was a position opening here, and I said, oh, I need to apply, and here I am.
We are certainly fortunate to have you. We love, seeing, I'm sure, how many of you have been to a Richmond Symphony concert in this? Okay, yeah, so you all know. You've all seen the enthusiasm of Valentina on the stage, what she can get from the musicians. It's just a really extraordinary experience. For anybody who hasn't made it, we hope to see you later this year. We've got a lot of performances still through the end of our season. Let's talk a little bit about how the orchestra works. Many of you maybe have been coming for a while, so you might know all of this, but we have actually a relatively large organization. We've got a staff of about 25 people working in marketing, in fundraising, and special events, helping bring the chairs on and off the stage. I mean, everything from putting the tape on the ground where the piano goes, to making sure that events are happening in our tent when we're out in the parks. So it's a really incredible group of administrative staff. And then we've got 70 professional musicians. And sometimes people think musicians do it just for their love of music, and they certainly have a love of music, but it really is their full-time jobs. They do this all day, every day, either performing or teaching or coaching or doing chamber music. And it is a pretty extraordinary, I think, feat.
Or studying.
Or studying, yes. There's a lot of studying and a lot of practicing. A lot of those scales are trying to write fugues. Not a lot of them are composers, but it could happen. And we have our season runs much like a school year, September through May, but we do a really wide variety of programs, right? So we've got our symphony programs, or our masterwork series, as you might know them, typically 8 concerts a year. We do them on Saturdays and Sundays. We have another whole program of pops, where we're doing often Broadway or Motown, or current local bands. We've got, next year, we've got some programs with some local bands that we're pretty excited about, or playing alongside movies. So, for example, this May, we're doing one of the Star Wars films with live orchestra. And it's also one of those things that I think is so interesting, because when you're watching a film, you may or may not notice all of the things happening with the orchestra, which of course makes the movie so great, usually, the soundtrack. But when you're watching it with a live orchestra, it's just a whole different experience. And this year we've done 2 programs with film, one with all of the Bugs Bunny cartoons that I grew up with all of the really great works of classical music that are in those cartoons, and then Star Wars coming up this May. But then we've got a whole bunch of other programs that we do in Ashland, at Randolph-Macon, programs at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, programs in parks, and we really try to go sort of all over the place. So it's a pretty complex organization with a lot of moving pieces. Valentina, do you want to talk a little bit about how it is when you're looking at this whole season, the scope of all of these programs? What do you do as you work to shape a season?
It's one of the most rewarding and most fascinating moments. And it really takes a long time to shape a season, because you really want that the season reflects who you are as an organization. You really want to reflect something that is really rooted in here. So the season must be drafted on the place. It cannot be, just in general, the ideal season for, that can apply to many different places. It has to be something relevant for people here. So, and the programs that you choose, the pieces, the repertoire, the artists, the guest artists that are coming, we really want them to be special. So it's also a combination of different things. We try to have, for example, the stars of the moment, but together also with our own stars. The people that are from here or that studied here and then went somewhere else, but that has a connection. For example, this last week, Daisuke, our concertmaster, took the stage and played as a soloist. Somebody that has always for 10 years, right? 10 years.
10 years, yeah.
Celebrating 10 years this year. So he has always been with the orchestra, like a pillar, a column in the orchestra, taking the stage, and facing the audience as a soloist. But early in the season, we had Sterling Elliott, this young cellist, just really a fabulous cellist that is not really from Richmond, anyone from
Virginia.
Yeah,
from down, I think, by Norfolk.
Yeah, and he's just such a fantastic player. And so we are always trying to nurture our own talents as well. But shaping a season is like, okay, have you ever thought, for example, okay, I have a dinner coming up for, I don't know, my friends, and what should I cook? What should I cook? And then you start thinking, okay, this, and then you savor them, and you kind of do an order. I want to do these as a start, and then this, and you kind of already taste not only the individual dishes, but also the order, how one follow the others. And you really kind of like, maybe I'm hungry, I'm sorry about that, but you really taste them. Something similar happens when you're drafting a season, because it's not just one dish, it's not just one concert, it's a series, it's an arch, it's a journey. So the pieces that you choose to perform later in the season, or one piece that follows the other. So, for example, last month we had this very heavy, I would say, kind of heavy meet, right, with Shostakovich and Rachmaninoff, that really romantic. And then these last weekend we had something really, really light and soft. So it's always it's wonderful. I really enjoy that. Sorry.
And how about, talk a little bit about preparing for a program with very different pieces on it. So our finale this year, we will be performing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony with the Richmond Symphony Chorus. Everybody loves Beethoven's Ninth. And then alongside it, we've got two works by living composers, Valerie Coleman and Joel Thompson. And preparing for that must be quite different, because I would assume you've conducted Beethoven's Ninth many times, whereas perhaps the other pieces maybe never before.
Yeah, that's the first time, and probably it's the first time with the orchestra too, especially because the Joel Thompson's piece is very new. It's the first time that has been performed, at least by a professional orchestra. So it's very fascinating when you put in the program something that has been played and performed by the orchestra so many times, so they kind of know what to expect and know how to approach. And when they study their parts, they practice, they know how it fits in the bigger picture. But when you approach a score that has never been performed, and sometimes you don't even have the audio, sometimes you're like on YouTube, like, let me see how it goes. But for new pieces, you don't have this luxury. So either you sit on the piano and you try to figure out, but sometimes there are not the vocal scores. So you just learn your part and say, okay, how does it sound? And it's really, really cool when you go to the first rehearsal and it's everybody like, sometimes, when you start a rehearsal with Beethoven, like you do the downbeat and everybody's like clicks. But sometimes with the new pieces, it's a discover at each moment, every 5 minutes we readjust and we really discover the new piece. And what is really beautiful about it And the reason why I really like to put new pieces together with pieces that are in the same, in the repertoire on the same program, is because the approach. So this fresh approach, this kind of curiosity that you have when you play something for the first time, you kind of applied also when you start playing Beethoven 9. And it's like, okay, it's like I'm discovering Beethoven 9 like if I were like 200 years ago and I'm playing this for the first time. There's something very beautiful about it. Very fresh.
I love that. We're starting to work a lot more with living composers and commissions. For those of you who are subscribers, you might have seen next season, we have 2 world premieres on our season that we have taken apart in commissioning. And in both instances, we will have the composers here with us, which I always think is so much fun to actually hear from the person who wrote the music. Because, that's not something we get with Beethoven and Mozart. We have to imagine what they wanted.
Exactly.
Yeah. But when we've got a living composer and you can have them there on your stage talking about how they wrote it and why they wrote it and what they were thinking or feeling, I just think it brings a whole new element to the work that's being performed. And just as you say, a whole fresh then feeling to the works you've heard many times before. I think it's a cool way to get deeper connected to the music and the experience itself.
And through commissions, we really bond sometimes with other orchestras. So Lacey was mentioning these 2 commissions that we're going to have next season. So they're very different. So the first commission is our own commission as an orchestra. So we, the Richmond Symphony, fully sponsor the composer. And by the way, the composer will be Zachary Wadsworth, that is a native from Richmond, and he is going to write. Am I spoiling? No, it should be
No,
not
it's
right.
out. You can tell him.
He's composing this piece for chorus and orchestra that will be about Richmond. So he is imagining. Now, I don't know exactly where he is with the actual composing, but he will be talking and transforming these. Transforming a place into a sound. So I'm very curious about it. And the second commission will be actually a co-commission, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's a co-commission through a granting organization, actually, that it's actually sort of a funny coincidence, because actually I didn't do it, but I was the lead commissioner before I came to Richmond of this piece when I was with the Las Vegas Philharmonic. We approached, the composer's name is Juan Pablo Contreras, to write a piece of music about the intersection of different populations. So he is a Mexican-born composer living in Los Angeles now. So if you think about the edges of Mexico and Texas, or in communities around Los Angeles where you've got distinct communities living right next to each other, the edge effects, where those things overlap and where people come together. So this is the work that's being commissioned, and we have 5 different orchestras that are a part of this. So the world premiere of, so I lied earlier, because we've only got the East Coast premiere. But anyways, the world premiere is happening in Las Vegas. And then shortly afterwards, we will have our premiere here. But we also have orchestras in California, one in Texas, and maybe New Orleans, I think, is the other one. That's all a part of this co-commission of the same piece, which is also really great for a composer to get not just one performance, because then sometimes it goes on a shelf in a library and doesn't get to enough other orchestras. And so whether it was really great or could be improved upon for the next time, people don't often get to hear it again. So co-commissioning is a really fantastic way of getting a piece of music into a bunch of different audiences, a bunch of different orchestras, more likely than to have that opportunity to look it up on YouTube and find out, what it sounded like. And so the other orchestras can continue to perform it. So, and we will have Juan Pablo Contreras here with us several times over between now and the premiere of that program, so that he can get to know our community and people can get to know him as a composer, which I think is really a lot of fun. And another thing we do as with these composers, but also with some of our guest artists, we're starting to do more activities in the community. The orchestra has always been very present in the community. I'm sure you've seen big tent concerts and some of the big activities that we've done, but we're starting to do some smaller visits into the community. So whether it's a composer doing a masterclass at a university or working with our youth orchestra, or we have a guest artist in residence with us for a week. So this year we had 2 guest artists in residence, and they would come and not only perform with the orchestra, but then do a pop-up concert in a coffee shop, a visit to a classroom, an opportunity in, eventually we'll go back to having opportunity in a home to hear them perform alongside Richmond Symphony musicians and chamber music, and just to be able to see all of the different facets of one very talented musician or 2 very talented musicians in different ways, because they have so many capabilities, these musicians, as they come in. And so that's a lot of what we continue to do, to bring our performance aspect into schools, into universities, into the community, and to bring people in even more, I think, to the symphony. Do you want to share? So this is one thing that hasn't been announced yet, even though it's before next season. Do we want to talk a little bit about what we're doing at the end of May?
Yeah, so as you know, we're closing the season with Beethoven 9. But the week after, we are doing a project in collaboration at Chimborazo Park, right? Yeah, and we'll be in collaboration with VCU Health Orchestra and our chorus, and we'll be in celebration of health workers. So it will be a great moment to be together and to say thank you and to just share wonderful music. So it's a wonderful opportunity also to play. So the groups, each one will have some space to perform their own pieces, but then at the end we'll bring everybody together on stage for a side-by-side performances. So we'll be kind of tight, we'll try to squeeze in, but the idea is that we're playing together finally after a couple of years and for this very special occasion, and I think it's very touching, it's very beautiful.
Yeah, we love collaborations and partnerships that help bring the symphony together with other, whether it's orchestras or artists or other organizations in town. And this is a really great way to sort of cap off the season in the tent, out in a park, outdoors, where families can come. People can bring their dogs if they want, well-behaved dogs, and just really be together. We have a number of outdoor activities like that. One of the things that we started last year because of COVID, we couldn't bring our tent somewhere and have a big park full of thousands of people. And so instead, we created a program called the Mile of Music, and it was in Forest Hill Park. And if you're familiar with Forest Hill Park, you know it's actually quite large, even though it's kind of in the middle of the city. And we had 4 distinct ensembles around, I thought it was just a cute turn of phrase, but it actually was a literal mile. And you would walk between one performance to the next. So last year we started with the chorus, and then they walked over to an area where a brass quintet was performing, another area with a string quartet, and with a woodwind quartet. And it was just a really delightful way to be outdoors, to hear some really great music. There are some beautiful natural amphitheaters at Forest Hill Park that really emphasized the music that was being performed. And we're doing that again this year in June, the first weekend in June. I think it's on the 4th. But so we're trying to really expand the ways that we can connect with our community, with our audiences, with the kinds of music that's being performed. And it's just really, it's a lot of fun, I think, to end the season that way.
But also, one of the incredible things about the Richmond Symphony is that the Richmond Symphony is one of the few organizations nationally that was able to keep playing during the pandemic. So find ways outside the box to, you mentioned Mile of Music. So, okay, if we cannot be all, in one place, let's move the musicians. So it's something that, some ideas that came out, or chamber music, that came out from necessity to just, keep the music alive. Now they're just great ideas anyway, so why not to maximize it? So some of them we're keeping them and maximize them. So I think it's a really great idea.
Yeah, thank you. And the other thing that kept going throughout all of this that is really quite remarkable and rare was our education programs. So over the course of the last 2 years, when we were not able to take musicians into schools anymore, which is a big part of what we do, or bring students into the concert hall, we really wanted to find ways of both continuing to connect young people with music education and music, but also to provide opportunities for teachers or parents at home trying to teach or deal with their kids, or the many things that we all know happen during all of those the COVID home teaching environments, and give them activities and connection to exciting programming. And so the Richmond Symphony School of Music was born, and out of it came a digital library of more than 40 hours of content for teachers to use, for educators to use, or for students to have access to. And we were able to give access to all of the public schools in Richmond and the surrounding counties to be able to utilize that. And that, again, is something that came out of necessity, but actually lives on. And now we will continue to add to it, even as we go back into schools, which we are thankfully finally able to do this month, which is very exciting. But that digital library is something that really adds an element to our educators' ability to show students, no matter what time, because I used to be on our schedule. They could only have it when we were able to go, but now they've got access to it all the time. And we have built it out so that it's connected to curriculum, not just music curriculum, but history, social studies, math in some instances. And so it can be utilized in a lot of different ways, which is really exciting. And our youth orchestra also managed to continue rehearsing remotely over Zoom, a thing that my musician mind has a very hard time figuring out how to do, but it was incredible what they were able to do. And what was really great, they're all back in person now. We've been back in person with our youth orchestras all this year. We have 4 ensembles, 150 kids that are involved in our youth orchestra program. And what's great is because they kept rehearsing in that difficult technological environment, they really didn't lose a lot of their capabilities. I think there are a lot of youth orchestras that just went dark over that year or year and a half. And so our youth orchestra has now had 2 concerts, 2 concerto competitions, and we've got our finale performance with all 4 ensembles at the beginning of May, which is really extraordinary. So I'm very excited about it.
And you have to see their faces. They're just so happy finally to just, share the stand and talk a bit. It's just really, really, they're cute.
It's so true. It's a lot of fun. Well, I'm curious if any of you have sort of specific questions or something you'd like us to talk about that we haven't already talked about, or something you really love. Oh, I think you're supposed to wait for the microphone.
I have looked at your programming for some years now, and I have also witnessed the talent that some of the soloists show. But I am actually very amazed at the amount of music that these musicians have to know, because your program changes all the time. And I guess I am just floored by, I'm sure you must have people wanting to get into the orchestra. I hope you do. But I am just amazed with the amount of knowledge that these musicians need to have.
It is true. It is so true, and we're so happy and glad and lucky in having the Richmond Symphony. The musicians are really fabulous, and it's true. It's a lot of music, and if you think about it, each week there's something just happening, a new music to learn. So it's also a skill to organize the practicing, because some pieces they will know it, but you need to put it in the hands, and it is a lot of work, but we have wonderful people and they're really excited. So when you do what you love, it's easier, but it is very hard.
It's also funny, because you mentioned people wanting to come to join the Richmond Symphony. We've had several auditions this year, and auditions are a really kind of crazy way of getting a job because they're behind a screen. So you never ever see the musician who's auditioning. They walk out on a carpet, so you can't hear what kind of shoes they're wearing, so you don't know if it's a man or a woman. They're not allowed to speak, so you can't hear their voice, you can't hear their age or if there's an accent. So it's really meant to be strictly on how they play and how they play in a very short time period. Auditions are a tough thing. But we had a principal tuba audition this year, and we had 140 people come to audition.
How do you narrow that down?
It was crazy. They listened to them all day. And then they come in sections, and then after each group of 6 usually, they decide if one is going to move on to the semifinals or not. And then they do it again, they do it again, and they do it again. It's quite a process.
I'm going to ask a real quick question, and then Peggy Ford can ask one. So how long do they get to audition? Is it like one full song? Do they all have to play the same song?
Oh, that's a really great question. So it depends a little bit on the instrument, but no, they, for the most part, they are given a list of excerpts. So bits of usually representative works that we might play. So symphonies that are known, sometimes new music, if that's a big part of what we're doing, and and often a combination of things so that you can hear different styles of playing, something lyrical, something very rhythmic perhaps. And in the audition itself, they're given a long list to prepare, a long list. And then in the audition itself, it's narrowed down to a small number of pieces. And usually each person only gets maybe 5 or 10 minutes before the audition committee decides if they can move on or not. So it's a very, it's stressful, it's tough. It is a tough process. Yeah.
Before a performance, how many times does the whole orchestra get together to rehearse? And my second question is, do you ever hear a clinker note during a performance?
Clinker note?
Oh, in the orchestra? I'll reply to the first question first. Yeah, so usually we start, and that's because of the pandemic. For example, the orchestra wasn't used to perform together fully since 2020. So one of the first things that, as a section, so we perform with a smaller number of people on stage, right? But the moment you need to put 70, 80 people on stage, it's not enough just to put everybody together and now we play. So one of the things that we started doing this year is to add a sectional rehearsal prior to the rehearsals. So you usually, if the concert are in the weekend, that's the full week of rehearsals. And we start with a sectional rehearsal. What is a sectional? So we divide the orchestra in families of the orchestra, of the instruments. So we have, for example, on the piece, was the Scottish Symphony last week. Okay, so we have the Scottish Symphony only with the strings. Violins, viola, cello, basses. And then after 1 hour, we have the same piece only with the woodwinds, for example. So they can really readjust and find the sound, of the section. And then we have at least 4 rehearsals, and then plus the general rehearsal. And the that is called dress rehearsal. And the dress rehearsal is also a very important rehearsal for the camera people. You know that it's live streamed, right? It's streamed. So they also need to rehearse. So during the dress rehearsal, we have the cameras. And what is also really cool that who operates the camera? Who chooses which instrument will be seen at that moment? So you have to know that there is a van in the docks, and in the van there is a lot of people with headphones, and there is one person with the score that organizes. Okay, ready the camera on the oboe in a 3, 2, 1 oboe, and then now camera on the violin, 1, 2, 3 camera on the violin. It's kind of like a movie set. Wow. I'm not answering the second one. I was like, no, it doesn't. They're all fabulous.
Does anybody else have a question? Oh.
this is not so much a question, it is a comment. We have a granddaughter who plays the violin, and she came up from Hickory, North Carolina, and stayed with us for a week whenever you were having a violin camp down at VCU, and that was very productive for her. She grew up a lot during that week.
Oh, that's really wonderful. That is also another great example of really fantastic collaborative projects. And it is coming back this year, except this year it's only going to be for one day. We couldn't quite get the full week going in time, but we will look at bringing it back. But we're excited even to have that one day back, because it is a really great opportunity for young people to get even further embedded in music.
I would make this comment that it was downtown, and it was always during the evening traffic rush whenever they were picking. That's the first time I've ever seen musicians in the street of Richmond directing traffic.
Oh, I didn't know about that. Now I'll be prepared.
I have another question. So you said that you guys have had several auditions. How is that typical, or how often do you normally have auditions throughout the year?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I would say it is a little bit more now. Many musicians chose other paths during the pandemic, although not so much from our orchestra, again, because we were one of the rare organizations that was able to keep playing. But usually there are maybe one or two auditions in a year. The path of a musician, often they will stay with an orchestra for a handful of years, particularly an orchestra like ours. Actually, our orchestra is really known for being a launching pad for musicians to have really they start their extraordinary careers here, and then they move on to really huge organizations. The first thing I knew about the Richmond Symphony was of a principal trumpet who played here many years ago, who ended up in Atlanta and then at the Los Angeles Philharmonic. I spent 15 years in Los Angeles. And the first time I heard this trumpet player, I was like, oh my God, he's so good. Where did he come from? And his first orchestra job was here in the Richmond Symphony. Wow. So they tend not to stay for usually their whole careers, although actually we do have a number of musicians who have also chosen to make Richmond their home. So it's a little bit of a mix. But there's always some usually that are moving on to another position, and then we do auditions again and bring in some extraordinary. I mean, right now the three positions we filled this year, two of them principals and one of them a second bassoon, all of them quite young and extremely talented. I mean, they just get better every year, it seems like. Yeah.
I think you ought to mention the summer concerts, because that's
Thank you.
so nice.
Thank you. Yes.
Chance to hear people that you wouldn't otherwise hear performing solos or duets. Whatever.
Yeah. So our summer series, which has been going on for quite some time, but actually has really become incredibly popular. It used to be often solo and piano, I understand, and we do a little bit of that now, but also a great deal of chamber music, and it's a really extraordinary opportunity to get quite close to the musicians and really get to know their playing in a completely different capacity. Again, to see that talent really up close and experience a whole different kind of concert than you would in the full orchestra. So this year we will have 4 Thursdays in July. It is at the Carpenter Center, but not in Carpenter. It is at the Dominion Energy Center. This year it will actually be in Rhythm Hall. Will be a little bit cabaret style, so you can have a little table for your wine. We're bringing the wine back, finally. Thank you for that. Yes, it's going to be very fun. We're very excited about it.
I like the fact that you're playing living composers, and I wonder how you go about selecting them.
Great question. How to select living composers? Well, first, I spend a lot of time listening to music, and and sometimes also looking at programs of other orchestras. And there's a lot of research behind just in the free time, whenever I'm free, or I have a lot of flights. And during the long flights, I download all the things I would like to listen, and I listen. And sometimes I just got curious about a style. If it's really hard to select, and especially with new music, you don't have the filter of the history. That after 200 of years, we all know that Brahms is a great composer, but it's easier because it's distant, so you can see it. Something that is alive and present, it's too close to us sometimes to really see it objectively. So it really, my meter of comparison is if some piece really speaks, if really catch with something in my body that resonates with something, if it really is telling me something, if I have goosebumps, okay, this is something interesting in a good way. Yeah.
You haven't mentioned choral works and the Richmond Symphony Chorus.
Great segue, thank you. Yes, indeed. Have any of you sung in the Richmond Symphony Chorus? Yeah. I was just wondering if we had any present in here. So our Richmond Symphony Chorus has almost as long of a history as the Richmond Symphony. We will be celebrating the chorus's 50th anniversary, belated. They're actually 51. They don't look a day over 49. The Richmond Symphony Chorus. They do. At this April, next month, with Haydn's creation, and it is going to be a really extraordinary event. And we also will be saying farewell. For those of you who have come to the chorus concerts for a while, you probably know Aaron Freeman, who has been the chorus director for 15 years, only one of two. This is a very rare thing at choruses. We've had two really extraordinary chorus directors. And Aaron is one of them. So this is something we'll be seeking to replace in the next year. But we'll be celebrating Aaron at that concert in April, and then again in May at our finale for Beethoven's Ninth. And the chorus is 140 volunteers. They do sing together because they love it, but they also work very hard. They rehearse once a week, every Tuesday. And this year there is I think new, although I'm newer than they are, so I can't, don't call me on it later if I'm wrong, but a chamber chorus. So a select elite group of the chorus that will be doing a set of concerts on their own. So they actually have another concert also in April. But yes, our chorus is really extraordinary, and we're excited to have them not just as a part of the symphony family, but on our symphony series next year. We'll be opening the season with them. Also, Mahler Resurrection, yeah, that's right, later in the season, and then as part of our holiday concerts, which everybody loves the holiday concerts. And the symphony also, we work with really all of the other arts organizations because the symphony plays for the opera some of the time. And we're doing Marriage of Figaro right now. It's starting now and traveling all around the state. And then also with the ballet. So we've got a really, really fantastic arts and culture space here in Richmond. And the symphony is really proud to be a part of all of those things.
I just realized that the symphony plays for the opera. You just said so. I'm wondering how you have symphony in Richmond and symphony and opera in Harrisonburg or down in Norfolk at the same time.
Yeah, that is a really good question. It is a feat of scheduling that is hard to underestimate. When we do, we call it a split orchestra, and we take our orchestra and we basically cut them in half and kind of go every other down the section. So you get equal talent groups in each place. And sometimes we also have to supplement them with some extra musicians here and there. But opera pits are quite small, so that's not a huge orchestra. And then we try to, when we're doing our programming that's at the same time, to complement so that we can utilize our entire orchestra in ways that highlights, their abilities. Any other? That's really, yeah. It is a very, it's funny to watch our production team try and figure out on the calendar where they're going and what they're doing and who's going to work where. And
Actually, I have a question. It's about scheduling. I mean, you've heard how many things are happening and sometimes overlapping. This week we are playing Mahler 4, and another part of the orchestra is playing the opera. But there are so many things happening, and how do you personally schedule everything? How do you make everything just work?
That's a great question. Well, I have a team of people that help me. Certainly not me just by myself. But yeah, I mean, it is a complicated puzzle, really, because we often start in a lot of different places all at once with artists. Sometimes the artists are driving scheduling. If we want a particular artist, we need to know when they're going to be available. Obviously, the availability of the hall and of you, Valentina, are really big factors into what we put when. And then once we get our sort of big signposts in, we really work to fill in the gaps and make sure that we are performing in as many places as possible or reasonable, depending, and making sure that we're hitting our different communities so that we are out in Ashland as much as we can be there. We go down in Chester or out in Goochland, and to make sure that we're trying to get close to people where they live as well as opportunities for them to come in. And then the other sort of, when we get to fill in the gaps, sometimes we get to do really fun, creative additions to what we're doing. And so we have a series that we do in Hardywood in a brewery, and at one time it was a repeat of other concerts that we did, but now we actually program. Well, you program. Now I'm answering your question for them, but we do programs that are specific to the brewery, and they even include beer pairings. So the feelings of the music with the tastes of the beer, which is really fun. And I have to say, these programs this year have been so much fun, just a really great way, and a completely different kind of orchestra experience than going in the concert hall. So yeah, it's a complicated set of things. There are some things that are planned many years in advance, some artists that are on hold 2 and 3 years out, and some things that we can't plan until we get quite a lot closer.
I have a question, but first a comment. You're a lot younger than I am, Valentina, so I get to call you by Valentina, okay? And anytime you want, I'm Larry, okay? I've been coming to Richmond Symphony concerts since the mid-'80s. And what you and that group do, every concert is just as good as it's ever been. You are a marvel, ma'am. Yeah. The ensemble, the phrasing, I mean, it's all just wonderful, wonderful. So please don't run away, okay? Don't get up bigger to other places, okay? My serious question is, well, that was serious what I just said too, but you all did a lot of experimenting necessarily with the COVID in broadcasting the concerts. What does your research tell you about the good or the bad of that, and how much of it might you continue? Being very conservative about illness, my wife and I stayed at home and just contributed our concert tickets back to the orchestra, but listened to what you did, and those concerts after the first couple were really high quality, and pretty much, I mean, a lot like 60% like being there. Okay, are you going to continue that in any way, or what are you going to do with
Yes, yeah, we are planning to continue doing that. Thank you. There are some complications around what concerts we can and cannot stream, having to do with very boring things like music licensing that I won't go into here. But definitely our intention is to continue, particularly with our symphony performances, and to really make that a constant, and both for people who aren't able to come to the concert hall, but also it's such a great way to re-experience a concert later. Because when you're there's nothing like live music, right? Being in the hall and hearing it live. But the great thing about the streamed performance is you get up close. You get to see the musicians' hands on their instruments, eventually their faces, not yet, but soon, and we hope. And I think that experience is a really important part of what we can offer. And one of the things I loved when we first started doing the streaming was we would get pictures of people at home watching, kids at a dinner table playing with dinosaurs, and our concert would be on in front of them, people on their couch in their pajamas, or people getting dressed up and, making a night in of their experience. And it just shows, the many ways we can experience the same concert program. And so having that as either an added bonus for people who are coming, or as a replacement for people who can't come or who just miss it. I always think, the opera and the ballet, or a play or a musical, often have this benefit of if you can't go one day, you can go the next weekend, or you hear about it from your friend and you can go the following month. And while you could come to the symphony the following month, you would never get to hear that experience again. And so this also gives a little bit of that added bonus. So yes, we will definitely continue doing that.
I'll mention something else that happens every year, and that's performing the Messiah.
Ah, the Messiah. Yes, indeed. See, you should be doing this. Yes, our holiday programs are a big part of our presentations, and Messiah and Let It Snow are sort of two complementary programs, which we may also start augmenting with holiday brass programs, and some other really, really fun things. Oh, the audience singing the Messiah along, like the whole thing, or just the end? Oh, I didn't know we did a sing-along Messiah. How fun. Okay, yeah. Okay, good note. I love that. I love a sing-along Messiah. I'm super impressed that people know the Messiah.
I am aware that there are musicians all over the state. I'm wondering what the relationship is between the Richmond Symphony and the groups in Norfolk or in Newport News or Harrisonburg. I'm sure that there must be some overlap.
Yeah, there are some musicians that play in multiple symphonies in the state and the region. We have, this is getting really nitty-gritty now, but we have, of our 70 musicians, a little more than half of them are sort of full-time musicians with the Richmond Symphony. And the other half are, they're called per-service musicians. And so they perform with us a certain number of times a year, but not year-round. Because a lot of that creative programming we've been talking about, or like if we're at Randolph-Macon or at the VMFA, we can't fit a full orchestra of 70 or 80 or 100 people. And so those musicians often then make their careers by working with a lot of different orchestras in that same sort of almost like a bunch of part-time jobs that kind of come together to make one full-time career. But there's not a lot of, we often talk with each other, the orchestras in the state, and, compare notes and talk about things that we're doing, but there's not otherwise, other than sharing some resources and sharing some musicians, there's not generally a lot of connection between us, but probably there should be more.
Any other questions out there? Oh.
Just one quick one. I came in 5 minutes late, so I may have missed it. But my question is a personal one for both of you, and that is for each of you, what brought you to Richmond?
Well, we did talk about our careers, but we didn't talk too much about specifically Richmond. So I can share my path to here. I had been in the business for about 15 years. I had worked in Los Angeles. I was in Las Vegas, Nevada, so it doesn't get a lot different from Richmond than Las Vegas, Nevada, I don't think. But you know, I was when I was interviewed for the job here. I was recruited, so someone called me, and when I was invited out to interview, they told me that I could go to a concert. And to my knowledge, nobody in the country had concerts. And I was like, "What do you mean I can go? Like with people and an orchestra, like on a stage, live?" And they were like, "Oh yeah, we've been performing since September." And this was in October of 2020. And my mind was blown. And I came out and came to a concert. There were 23, I guess, musicians on stage, 10 feet apart, super distanced, and the audience felt super empty, but was sold out. It's the benefit of having only 250 people there. And I was crying. It was like a whole thing. I was like, I didn't think I was going to hear live music again for at least a year. And I was able to spend some time getting to know the commitment of this city to their symphony. And a city where the government, the venue, the board, and the patrons supported the symphony enough to keep performing, to keep our musicians employed. Nobody had their pay cut. Nobody was furloughed. I mean, I can't swear to it because I haven't checked with every orchestra in the country, but if we are not singular, we are one of a very, very few orchestras that could boast that. And of an orchestra of this size, I can tell you we absolutely were singular. And I couldn't, at that moment, I couldn't imagine being anywhere else. And then I had the great benefit also of spending the weekend here and going to the VMFA and seeing the river and going to Maymont. And I was like, this place is great, I'm in. But really, I think that, and even both of us were hired in the midst of that. Even when I found out they'd hired a music director, every orchestra I knew that was in a music director search was like, we're just gonna wait till this gets over and then we'll start again. So it just shows a boldness and a commitment to the arts, to the symphony, and what it means to have a symphony in Richmond that I've not experienced in a lot of places.
When I was 21, so the other day, I got my first job as music director, principal conductor and music director of the University Chorus of Florence. And I stayed there for 10 years. And in those 10 years, I really understood that I really wanted to be a music director. But there's no path to music director. There is a path to conductor, but music director is something else. It's really something very deep. And in 2017, I was living in Brazil at that time, working with the São Paulo Symphony, and the music director there was Marin Alsop. So Marin Alsop, you might remember her because she was the associate conductor of the Richmond Symphony back in probably. I don't remember when, but it was like, it was time ago. And I was talking with her because she is my mentor. She is not only as a conductor, but just, as a musician, she's such a wonderful person. And so we were talking about conducting, and she was telling me, Valentina, being a conductor and a woman, it's a tough job. Well, already being a conductor is a very tough choice, but also being a woman, it's really challenging. But she told me, the first orchestra, the first community, they gave me a chance when I was nobody, when I was, no more than a student. My first chance to be a conductor was in Richmond. And I said, what? Yeah, I said, the moment they believed in me, they saw something in me before anybody else. They really took the chance and they gave me this possibility. And I was very moved by this, and I didn't know about Richmond. And the first thing I did was going on a website and look about the symphony, and I saw there was an opening for music directors. Okay, this is an incredible coincidence. So I sent the application. The process was very long, like 2 years and a half. So I got all the interviews and, all the stages of the auditioning. And when I came here, it was late of February 20. So I did my audition before anything got shut down. That was my last program. It was last program of the orchestra. And I was very, very, I don't know, when you conduct, it's not when you play an instrument, you play with the people, So the relationship, this is like an empathy that you have with the orchestra is something really deep, and you cannot really explain it. It's hard to say why sometimes with an orchestra it works, and sometimes with another orchestra it doesn't work within the same repertoire. It's just about the people. And when I came here and I experienced, making music with these musicians, something just clicked. Something clicked, and it was so natural. And we had the best time. I mean, I had the best time in a long time. And I said, okay, this place is really special. And it felt home, And you cannot explain. It just clicked, and this is a joy. This is a privilege for me to be here with you. So thank you.
Well, if there's no other further questions, I know that I have had a great time learning all about this, and all about you guys has been so wonderful. So thank you. Thank you for coming out to us. All right, guys, have a good evening.
Thank you.